We are delighted to introduce our session, Navigating Cultures, the Land and Its People. M. Mukundan, Shabir Ahmed Mir, Lindsay Pereira, who will be right on your screen in a minute, Daribha Lindam, and Vijay James in conversation with Devapriya Roy, so a six-people panel. Boundaries of the world are imposed, both physical and intangible, some natural, some imagined, and some imposed. All 5 novels shortlisted for the JCB Prize for Literature 2021, who are also presenting our session, are emblematic of the reasons of which they write. In conversation with Devapriya Roy, M. Mukundan, Shabir Ahmed Mir, Lindsay Pereira, Tariba Lindam, and Vijay James discuss the role of borders in their writing. All of their books part of the JCB Prize for Literature series are also available at our bookstore. M. Mukundan, our first panelist today, is a well-known fiction writer from Kerala and has over 40 books to his credit. He was presented with the, and do excuse me if there is a mispronunciation, for the Ezhutachan Puraskaram, the highest theatre award in Kerala, the insignia of the Chevalier in the Order of Arts and Letters by the Government of France, and is a 2-time winner of the Crossword Award. He was president of the Kerala Sahitya Academy and won the JCB Prize for Literature in 2021 for his novel Delhi, a Soliloquy. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. M. Mukundan. So if you could please come up on stage. Thank you. Our next author is Shabir Ahmed Mir, a poet and writer based in Pulwama, Jammu Kashmir. He's the author of the book The Plague Upon Us, which was published by Hachette in 2020, which is now a couple of years ago. Sir, please may I welcome you on stage. Lindsay Pereira, our third panelist, as you can see on the screen behind me, and also I'll be hiding so you can see him clearly, is a journalist and editor. He holds a PhD in literature for his work on gender attitudes implicit in 19th century Indian fiction. He was also co-editor of the anthology Women's Voices, published by Oxford University Press. And his first novel, Gods and Ends, was shortlisted for the 2021 JCB Prize for Literature and Tata Literature Live First Book Award for Fiction. May we please have a hand for him. Dariba Lindam is a writer and civil servant from Shillong whose debut novel, Name, Place, Animal, Thing, was recently shortlisted for the JCB Prize for Literature. Lindam was named one of the promising writers of 2021 and beyond by the digital magazine Feminism in India and made it to the list of best summer reads of 2020 by Vogue India. Her reviews have featured in The Hindu, The Caravan, and First Post, amongst others. Our fifth panelist today, Vijay James, was born and brought up in Kerala and writes in Malayalam. An engineer by profession, he worked at the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center. His debut novel, and I do apologize because I did not have time to ask him the pronunciation, Purapadinte Pustakam, or The Book of Exodus, bagged the DC Books Silver Jubilee Award and the Malayattur Prize. His novel, Anti-Clock, was shortlisted for the JCB Prize for Literature 2021 and has won the O.V. Vijayan Award and Thikkurusi Award as well. Welcome, sir. Devapriya Roy, our panel moderator today, I apologize, is the author of 3 best-selling novels, The Vague Women's Handbook, The Weight Loss Club, and Friends from College. In 2015, she published The Heat and Dust Project, co-written with Saurav Jha, which debuted #1 on the Hindustan Times AC Nielsen list. Roy published Indira in 2018, a unique graphic biography of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in collaboration with Priya Kurian. She is currently translating Tagore's Gora into English. Ladies and gentlemen, Navigating Cultures, the Land and Its People, M. Mukundan, Shabir Ahmed Mir, Lindsay Pereira, Dariba Lindam, Vijay James, in conversation with Devapriya Roy.
Good evening. Welcome to a discussion, to a panel with India's most exciting writers. And I know that's something quite dramatic to say, but in this case, it's literally true. What the JCB Prize has done in the last few years since its inception, is to introduce us to the most edgy work in literary fiction in India across languages, right? So without further ado, I want to just dive in and ask our authors a few questions. What I want to tell our very sort of intimate audience today is that we will have 15-20 minutes for audience questions, right? We want this to be interactive. Our authors want it to be interactive. They want to listen to you, they want to answer your questions. And as our senior most author, Mukundanji, just told me in the green room, that we want to hear from the readers, right?
You ask a question or I just speak? How is it?
Okay, so first question, shall I start with you, James? Lindsay, I'm not going to forget you, okay? I can see you there. You can see I've done my homework, right? I've got a notebook full of questions. I didn't let them see what the questions were.
But you didn't give us chance to do homework.
All right. James, you've written recently in a very moving essay, "My stories and novels have evolved as the offspring of all the landscapes I have experienced since childhood." Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? The world from which your books emerge.
First of all, let me tell that it is a blessing for me to be here along with our dear Mugundetan, who is the pride of Malayalam language, reading whose books we all started writing. So, thanks to JLF as well as to JCB for making such an occasion for me to be here. And the question which you asked about the culture in which I was involved, because now I think that a writer, he writes something which he encountered within his life. Normally, which life he has, because now, as far as I am concerned, when I look backwards, I was born and brought up in a very remote village in Kerala. Actually, I did my schooling in a Malayalam language school. That was there in Kuttanadu, in the coastal area of Kerala. Rather than studies from this in the classrooms, I think I got more lessons from outside the classrooms. That was the message which I wanted to convey to the audience and to you. I feel that a writer never creates any story, in fact, according to me, because he takes all the stories from the nature. The stories have already happened and it is there in the nature. You know that when the apple fell on Newton's head, he became aware of the gravitational force. And we study in physics, Newton's laws of motion, and then the relativity theory of Newton, everything. But Newton has not created these laws and theories actually. He has only invented it. The nature has created it and implemented it from time immemorial. And Newton happened to be the one who discovered it and revealed it to the world. Like that, the writer also do the same thing. The nature has created the stories. It is there everywhere. The writer has to tune to the frequency of the nature to access it. When we are sitting here, you know that so many radio frequency waves are here of different TV channels, different radio channels. If you are able to tune to a particular channel frequency, using your mobile or laptop, you will be able to access the stories and films and everything that is around us.
Right.
The writer also does the same thing only. He's through a channel, he's accessing these stories. Actually, the writer has got the role of a pen only, according to me. Then coming to the sometimes some apples fall on our head also, writer's head also.
Right.
That is the initiative for each creation.
Right.
The first time the apple has fallen on me, it was when I was a final year student. I happened to attend the marriage function of one of my friend's sister. It was in the coastal area of the outskirts of Cochin. It was in an island It was isolated from the mainland of Cochin. Then when I entered that island, I was really astounded because it was so peculiar one. The type of people they live, the traditions which they follow, the beliefs they have, their ethnic cultures, everything was entirely different than what I have experienced there.
Right. Right.
So it felt to me that there are so many seeds of stories, in fact, which is buried under that fertile soil,
The
about to
stories
sprout.
buried under that fertile soil.
that was
Kerala,
yes, that was the
ready to sprout.
apple that has fallen on me.
the apple that fell on him. I love how many scientific metaphors James gave us. The writer is engineer also, let's not forget, right?
Then what I did is, many times I visited that land along with my friend. I went in the innards of the island and met different people. I mingled with them. In fact, I danced with them. Their customerism dance was there. Because as a writer, what I wanted to do is I want to experience these things first before I write it, as far as possible.
Right.
I have written a story of, about Chaura Shastra, the science of thievery, but I have not experienced the science of thievery. But I studied it. I interviewed some, some thieves
Oh,
to get their experience about thievery.
right.
To make that science of thievery. It was published in English by Westland
Right.
Books. That was
Right.
my first book, just published
That was
in
translated
English.
in English, Chora Shastra. So we'll also come back and talk about research in the next round. Thank you, James. I don't know if we should, if I should ask my next question to Lindsay, just because he's a little further away than the rest of us. Lindsay, I'm looking at you. I've been told to look at the camera to actually look at you. Okay. You know, when I was reading Gods and Ends, I remembered this essay that the African-American writer and intellectual Henry Louis Gates Jr. had written about his own memoir, Colored People. And he said that in that, for the first time, he believed he had lifted the veil from the way African-Americans lived their lives in private. Nobody had written about their lives in the way that James chose to. And then what I really found very interesting about this essay is that he talks about how he had gone to a book event, much like this today, and he read out from it, and then he was waiting to sign books, and an old lady who reminded him of his mother walked up to him. She was wearing lace gloves and and very sternly she told him, why have you written this? You know, why have you opened up our world and shown it to the white world? That's what she meant. So, Lindsay, you've written in a lovely little essay that your mother was upset when she read this book. She was very moved, but it triggered something in her. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
It is difficult. I think, you know, the way, when I think about why my mother reacted the way she did, or a couple of months after the book was published, I happened to participate in an online book club that was featuring Gods and Ends, and a number of people there told me that they were upset as well. You know, they represented the community. They felt as if I had said or talked about things that weren't supposed to have been shared with the world at large. I think the problem lies with our inability to engage with difficult questions. It's probably why the country is at the stage it finds itself in today. You know, our inability to engage with voices that are different from our own, our inability to confront the dark truths that lie at the heart of all our communities, whether we are Hindus or Muslims or Christians, our inability to ask questions of people who claim to represent us is partly why we are at a stage where, you know, bigotry is now the norm rather than the exception. And I think my mother reacted to the book in that way primarily because of her refusal to engage with some difficult questions too. I don't blame her for it. I don't blame any of the readers for having that kind of perspective. I respect it, but I believe that it is only by confronting them that we can start to change the way we engage with the world, which is why I wanted to do that.
Thank you, Lindsay. Dariba, you said somewhere that in Name, Place, Animal Thing, by the way, Name, Place, Animal Thing, the title itself resonated very much with me because I think for a whole generation of us, that was the game we played in school, right? This was school before video games or maybe not video games. That was just me being a geek, but before phones and all kinds of cool things that kids these days do, we played Name, Place, Animal Thing. So, Dariba, you said that Shillong in your book is a character in its own right. It's not window dressing. And it's a character, and I really like the word you've used, with dignity. What did you mean, and what was it like writing about Shillong?
When I set out to write the book, I don't think I intended for Shillong to have to play such a role in the novel. But while the stories are all disparate and they appear to be connected through Shillong, they're all set in Shillong, they're connected that way. They can be read in isolation, but the one thing that runs across is Shillong. And because I live there, because I grew up there, I perhaps can give a lot of people who have never lived there, have never been there, never interacted with Shillong or its people, I can give you perhaps not a bird's eye view, but a more intimate view of a very small town that very few people know anything about. Whenever I talk to anybody who if I mention I'm from Shillong, the first thing they'll say is, oh, it's a rock capital of India, or
Right.
some such thing or the sort, or I have been to this waterfall, or so on and so forth. They mention certain things, certain places. That's all very good and that's very fine, but I don't know if they're really interacted with the city or the place. They have been to certain tourist destinations, but they haven't interacted with the people. Perhaps they haven't interacted with the food, with the culture, and I think it has to do with a lot of the way that Indians travel. I think they want to get on a bus, get off, look at a thing, say they've seen the thing, and go back and say, yes, I've seen the thing, I've done the thing, I now know.
I'm an expert on Shillong.
Yeah, I'm now an expert on Shillong. And who am I to tell anyone how to travel? But it would be good if you spoke to people, if you ate some of the food, or you tried at least, and you interacted with people more. You know, this was a way for me to show people that Shillong is different than your city, but the way we grew up, there's so many similarities. It's different in geographical location, but there are many things in Shillong that a lot of people would agree with. I'm sure if you go to Shillong, there's so many things that are so similar to your small town. So I hoped to bring people together. For example, the name of the book, it is a way to harken back to a time that was lost, perhaps, to you and to me, who are much older now. And in order to kind of arrest you, pick up the book, so you could pick up the book, feel a sense of, familiarity. Then you read about the place and you're like, oh, I don't know this place. But I'm trying to make the unfamiliar familiar.
Right. To make the unfamiliar familiar and the familiar unfamiliar.
Right, correct.
The writer's job. With that, I come to you. Yes. You've written about the city I live in, Delhi. And I too came to live in Delhi from a different place. And here, Sahadevan, through Sahadevan's eyes, you show us Delhi through the eyes of a young man who lives through two very important decades of Indian history. So it's sort of bookended by 1962, the war and the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi and the anti-Sikh riots in Delhi. You've written somewhere that Connaught Place is the place that's frequented by beautiful, well-heeled people, or as we now say, Khan Market is that place, right? but you didn't want to write about those people or those places. You were more, you looked to the margins of the city where people who were struggling, migrants who were struggling, lived and tried to build their lives. So would you tell us a little bit about what inspired you?
Well, our subject is navigation of culture, navigating cultures.
Yes.
So let me
Yes.
connect
Yes.
whatever I see to that particular subject. And in the meantime, I would also like to say a few words about my childhood, because James talked about his school days. So we should always begin with our school days. So when I was 4 years old, my father took me to a nursery school in Mahe. The school was run by a Frenchman. His name is Charlie Master. He's a very elderly person, a Frenchman. Okay, and he had a beautiful daughter. So he taught us the alphabets, but in Malayalam, usually we learn the Malayalam alphabets, A, E, E, and all that. Or in English, A, B, C, D. But I was taught the French alphabets, A, B, C, D. So see, my schooling started with that, like that. And though I was just 4 years old, I told myself, well, look, when you grow up, you should marry his daughter, Therese, because she's so good looking. And by the time I grew up, she was already a mother of 3 children. So that was a tragic thing, that happened in my school days. I mean, when I was 4 years old. But now coming back to, let's be serious, and coming back to the navigating cultures. You see, I believe that culture lives in a language. Yeah. So wherever a language travels, culture travels with that. That's how this book, Delhi, a Soliloquy, it's about the Malayali migrants, Malayalis who went to Delhi and settled down there. So many Malayalis went to Delhi. So when they went to Delhi, their language also traveled with them. And hidden in their language, the little Malayali gods, or the fragrance of mango trees, or the cold winds, all these things travel to Delhi.
Yes.
So, for example, I
Yes.
went there, I was not all alone. I carried with me my river, Mahi River, and the cool breeze, and all the spicy food, and especially the little gods. We had so many little gods in Mahi. We don't have great gods like Shiva and all that. We had very powerful local gods. So I took all of them with me. So I never went to Delhi all alone. See, that is how culture navigates. When you go there, you carry them. So there are thousands of Malayalis in Delhi. All of them, they did what I did. So all the Malayali gods migrated to Delhi, and they built their little temples in places like R.K. Puram
Ayyappa
and all
temple
that.
in R.K. Puram.
Yeah, and
INA
there are so many
market.
Malayali
Yes, of
restaurants
course.
where they sell Malayali food. This is how culture navigates. And coming to your question about the novel, everybody asks me why you didn't write about good things. There are so many good things about Delhi. There are good people, beautiful people, great people, charismatic people. And why did you write about such as the barber who works in the street, or the gutter cleaners, people like that? Well, you see what happened, I didn't do it intentionally. But always the poverty attracts me. Poverty and suffering attracts me. So I didn't. Delhi was a beautiful place. There's no doubt. But there's beneath the beauty, there is the reality. There's the poverty, suffering, and all that. So naturally, I wanted to write about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That is why this kind of a novel
Right.
was written. Then I'm happy about it. Well, in the afternoon, we have another session. I explained why I wrote about this sort of. And I had a problem. Problem was to find a narrative, because I have written in Malayalam in a very complicated language. But here I wanted to write in a very simple language. So
Yes.
I tried to develop a narrative which
Right.
is simple,
And the novel was
communicative.
also serialized, right? So we'll come back to it and talk a little bit about what that means to the story when it's being